Good evening. My name is Victoria Ford. I'm a graduate student from North Carolina State University, and today I'll be talking to you about maternal undernutrition. So, for today's objectives, we will be talking about fetal placental development and exchange of nutrients. We'll also be talking about restricted maternal nutrition and its effects on placental development and vascularity, muscle fiber number, birth weight, and carcass weight. Then we're going to check out some solutions to maternal undernutrition. I have a keyword for you today, which is nutrient restriction, and that's any series of events that reduce fetal and or perinatal nutrient supply during critical windows of development. This results from maternal nutrient supply, deranged metabolism and regulation, physiological extremes, environmental conditions, or placental insufficiency. So first things first, we are going to talk about fetal and placental development and exchange of nutrients. As you all know, the placenta plays an important role in transporting nutrients from mother to fetus. In the early phase of fetal development, the following will occur: maximal placental growth, differentiation, vascularization, and organogenesis. For those of you who are not familiar with how the placenta works, I have a video. The link you will see above will take you to a 3D animation video of retention of placenta, although I will not be talking about ROP today. If you watch the first minute of the video, it will give you a good idea of how the placenta works and how the nutrients are transported. If you don't watch the video, I have a figure that you can take a look at, and basically what happens is the cotyledons of the placenta and the carunculus of the uterus attach to each other, creating a placentome. And that placentome will ultimately help transport the nutrients from the mom to the fetus during gestation. Once again, if you did not watch the YouTube video, the points that I made on the figure and some coming from the video are provided to you in the first 4 lines of this slide. I will note that at day 120 of gestation, the caruncular area will vascularize to meet the demands of the growing fetus. During the later phases of gestation, 75% of fetal growth in ruminants will occur. The placental growth itself will decrease, while the placental function itself will increase. Once again, making a point that the placenta is trying to meet the demands of the growing fetus. So it's going to be trying to supply as much nutrients as possible that it can. So now we have to think, what happens to the mom if she's fed inadequately? What if she's not receiving the right amount of nutrients? What happens to the fetus? Let's take a look at the effects of restricted maternal nutrition. So, it's going to be changes in placental development and vascularity. Organ development is also susceptible, depending on the time period in which undernutrition may occur. The pancreas, liver, adrenals, lungs, thyroid, spleen, brain, thymus, and kidneys can all become affected. We'll also see a decrease in muscle fiber number and nuclei, an increase in fetal blood pressure, and reduced birth weight and carcass weight. Topics with the smiley face next to it are the ones that I am going to talk about today, more so, although the susceptibility of organ development being affected and increase in fetal blood pressure, those topics you will find in the reference section of the slideshow, if you're interested in reading up on it. But for the most part, my next few lectures, my next few slides will focus on these three topics with a smiley face. We're going to start with the effects on placental development and vascularity first. I used a study from Boname, in which the study was conducted at the University of Wyoming, using Angus and, hopefully I'm pronouncing this right, Goatlovich cows. They used 30 cows total, and first they synchronized the cows for breeding, followed by artificially inseminating them using semen from one bull. The control cows in the experiment were fed native grass hay with vitamins and minerals for the first 125 days of gestation. The nutrient-restricted cows were fed minerals and vitamins at about 50% of what the controls were being fed, as well as being fed millet straw. 10 controls and 10 nutrient-restricted cows were slaughtered at day 125 of gestation and necropsy. The controls that were left continued the same diet until day 250 of this gestation. On the other hand, the nutrient-restricted cows were re-alimented by introducing hay, cracked corn, soybean meal, sunflower meal, cane molasses, pearl skim milk, and safflower seed meal. This new diet was made to help them achieve the same body score as controls by day 220. And at day 250, the controls and nutrient-restricted cows were slaughtered and necropsied. As soon as they were slaughtered, the uterus and fetus were weighed immediately. The placentomes that were close to the umbilicus were weighed and measured, as well as the caudalinin and furuncular tissues. They were all pulled, weighed, and measured. Back up. To your left, you'll see A, B, and C, where caudalinin tissue has been stained at day 250 of gestation. And to the right, you'll see a stain slide of the placentome from day 250 of gestation. And what they were looking for was to measure the capillary vascularity measurements. There are 4 measurements total: capillary number density, capillary cross-sectional area density, capillary surface density, and average cross-sectional area per capillary. After measurements were taken, they found that nutrient-restricted cows during early gestation, followed by realimentation between day 125 to 250, affects placental angiogenesis and mRNA abundance. No alterations in measurements of caruncles or caudalinin tissues of nutrient-restricted cows at day 125. So no significant changes during that period. After realimentation from day 125 to 250, in caudalinin tissues, CAD, CND, and CSD were decreased in placentomes of nutrient-restricted cows, and in furuncular tissues, CSD were increased. Restricted maternal nutrition can also cause a decrease in muscle fiber. In this article by Zhu, ewes were the main focus of the study. The ewes were initially weighed at day 20 of gestation, and at day 21, they were all fed control rations individually. At day 28, they split the group up in half. One half became the control fed group, while the other half became the nutrient restriction group, which that group only received about half of the nutrients of what the control fed group was receiving. Their weights and body condition scores were taken to adjust rations as needed. At day 78, all of the ewes were fed control diets. Both groups eventually reached similar body weights as well. After birthing of the lambs had free access to creep feed from birth to wean. And at day 120, the lambs were weighed at weekly intervals and eventually transitioned to ad libitum until slaughtered. Their longissimus dorsi and semitendinous muscles were sampled and weighed. After analyzing the tissue, they found that the nutrient restricted muscle fiber diameter in the longissimus dorsi increased, but the muscle fiber itself was at a low percentage. They also found that in nutrient restricted ewes, there was an increase in the myosin 2B in the skeletal muscle. Unfortunately, insulin resistance is associated with the 2B muscle fibers. And in terms of those lambs that suffer from insulin resistance, we will also see a decrease in GLUT4 transporter. So, during fetal development, reduction in skeletal muscle mass can predispose offspring to diabetes, obesity, and muscle weakness. Nutrient restriction can also cause decreased activity of CPT1, accumulation of IMTG, and downregulation of key enzymes involved in the mitochondrial function. Along with decrease in muscle fiber number, we will also see a decrease in the birth and carcass weight. In this study by Greenwood and others, it reviewed the consequences of cattle nutrition and growth during prenatal and neonatal life for efficiency in growth and beef and carcass quality. This article does include recent studies of other published articles that also talk about consequences of maternal nutrition and growth during pregnancy and weaning. The next four slides will consist of two tables. The upper table will be in reference to the consequences of prenatal growth and nutrition, and the bottom will pertain to consequences of pre-weaning growth and nutrition. And both of those tables will pertain to the topic above. We will start with Table 1, the consequences of growth in utero for growth and live weight characteristics of beef cattle to 30 months of age. Here we see that the cattle that suffered from restricted maternal nutrition from early pregnancy to parturition remain smaller during rearing and postnatal age after weaning. In fact, growth of low birth weight cattle was significantly slower than those of high birth weights. This is except at equivalent feedlot entry of live weight. Also, the differences in weight of calves at birth that followed maternal nutrition during late pregnancy vanished by weaning when the post-nutrition was of high quality with availability. In Table 6, it was recorded that the low weaning weight cattle grew more rapidly during backgrounding at the similar rate in the feedlot. This ultimately resulted in rapid growth overall from weaning to 30 months of age. These studies, as well as this one, found that severe nutritional restriction to weaning limits compensatory growth prior to feedlot entry, resulting in smaller cattle and cusses and less retail yield of beef at same age. Now let's take a look at body and carcass composition as it pertains to consequences of growth for carcass and yield characteristics in utero and from birth to weaning. In Table 3, you will notice that maternal nutrition restriction did not influence indices of fatness, that is, besides that of rump fat. You will also notice that there is an overall little difference in carcass composition between high and low birth weights. Low birth weights had similar retail yield, intramuscular fat content, fat trim, and bone content at equivalent carcass weights. If you can, also take a look at the ossification score of low birth weight. There's a higher value than its counterpart, suggesting that there is an impact of prenatal growth on calcification of bone and relative maturity. In Table 8, there was more fat trim, less retail yield, and less bone in the carcass of the cattle that were grown rapidly. The greater fatness at weaning persisted to 30 months. Carcasses from light weaners remained smaller with lower weight to retail beef because of failure to compensate fully in weight. The study suggests that the factors that were likely to have contributed to increased fatness among the small compared with large weaners, which were subsequently fed concentrates, includes the following: greater length of time on concentrate feed to reach the slaughter weight, greater weight-specific intake of nutrients following the nutritional restriction, a greater requirement for protein relative to energy at weaning, and hence potential nutrient imbalance in the concentrate diet during the early post-weaning phase, and more limited capacity for lean tissue accretion post-weaning in the small compared with large weaners. As for beef quality, from both consequences of growth prenatally and birth to weaning, there were no adverse effects on peak force, compression, cooking loss, and color in the longissimus and semi-tendinous muscles due to restricted growth. That's both prenatally and pre-weaning. As for microfiber characteristics, in both tables as well, you'll see that the number and size and percentages and the relative areas of microfibers in the longissimus and semi-tendinous muscles shows that they were not affected prenatally and from birth to weaning. And just an overview of everything we talked about. Chronic growth retardation is associated with reduced growth potential, resulting in smaller cattle. More extreme intrauterine growth retardation can result in slower growth throughout postnatal life. Retail yield is reduced in cattle severely restricted in growth during pregnancy or from birth to weaning in comparison to cattle well grown at the same age. Carcasses are similar or leaner in composition from slow births to weaning cattle than those grown rapidly. There were, like I said, no adverse effects of shear force, compression, cooking loss, and color from restricted prenatal and pre-weaning nutrition and growth. Environmental influences remain to be determined during stages of embryonic, prenatal, and neonatal calf development. So let's take a look at a couple solutions that we could choose in terms of if we have a cow or a ewe or a pig that is suffering from maternal undernutrition, or that will come to terms to suffering from maternal undernutrition. We could provide protein supplementation during late gestation. We could increase global nutrient supply through gestation. We could provide high energy concentrate feed following growth restriction from birth to weaning, in which the slowly growing may become fatter than their counterparts. Or we could just calculate appropriate feeding requirements. How can you calculate appropriate feeding requirements, you say? Well, funny enough, I came across an article on the internet from the Virginia Cooperative Extension. I believe they are affiliated with Virginia Tech. And in this article, they gave us basically 2 ways to determine the nutrient requirements of beef cows and calves. And that is with the use of pre-calculated tables and computer program with formulas that key in on factors such as breed, weight, body condition, physiological state, composition, and environment. And this all comes from the nutrient requirements of beef cows. They also have example diets for beef cattle whom are pregnant, lactating, pregnant heifers that are mid-gestation, just to name a few. And they also provide you with the pre-calculated tables themselves in the article. So you guys can definitely take a look at that and kind of brainstorm on, what would you do if you had a pregnant heifer cow, and think of how you would meet her nutritional requirements based on these pre-calculated tables. Thank you so much for listening in on my lecture. If you guys have any questions at all, feel free to shoot me an email at vaford@ncsu.edu.